This week on the Misfit podcast, we tell you how we prepare CrossFit Games athletes. Welcome to the Misfit podcast, number 23, Games Edition.
Whoa, hey, that's pretty good.
Big Daddy Sherb coming in with the intro. I like it.
Wow.
What do we got today, gentlemen?
We're going to tell you guys how we prepare our athletes for the CrossFit Games. In the past, we've had these crazy spreadsheets and all this work that Seth and I have done with the help of Matt and Gabe, and it's like no one gets to see it. We don't talk about it, and then we go out on the road and people want to know, what are these guys doing? What's different? So we thought we'd change it up for you guys this year, explain a little bit about what we've learned in the past, what we're doing to help these guys out, and hopefully you guys here in a few weeks will go to the articles section if you are a pro or complete member on our website, and we will have the games training up for you so you can look at it, pull it apart, tell us how awesome it is, how terrible it is, maybe pull a piece out of it. Every once in a while you'll see our athletes post on, Instagram, whatever, I did this and this was my time. You can ask them in the comments section. So just trying to connect you guys with the games athletes a little bit more.
Yeah, so before even considering constructing a 7-8 week program for the games, you kind of have to understand the games. And to do that, you have to have been watching the games for the last 10 years now, right? So luckily, we're kind of like CrossFit game nerds, and that's sort of how we got into CrossFit. It was to work out, but we love our affiliates, but we've always favored the sport side of things over the affiliate model. And it's just kind of where our passions lie as much as we love our affiliates. It's just we are obsessed with the sport. And when the season comes around, we pick apart every nuance, study every detail, and we can kind of use this information to predict progressions of the sport. We've been pretty successful over the last couple of years. We haven't always been training games athletes, but we've had a pretty good idea of what we expected to see at that level. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, but usually we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to see. There's a lot that goes into what we think about with this, even more so than the blog. The blog is very generic. It's very like, you have all this time to build up to become really fit and have a shot at the open, and then maybe a shot at regionals, and then if you're that 0.0001%, you get a shot at the games. And with that, the further along you go, the more specific the programming has to be, the more purposeful it has to be. And really, when we start writing for the games, we have usually only a handful of athletes in mind. So even though we write one kind of template for everybody, it obviously has to be customized to fit the needs of the individual game athlete or the team or the master or the teenager that's going to the games, which we program for as well. But kind of understanding the progression and what we expect to see and still relying on the athlete's fitness level that got them there to begin with is really the key. So the first thing that I think about when I start writing stuff is basically what kind of experiences can I put the athlete through in 7 weeks so that they can face similar experiences at the games and have a game plan or a strategy or have something to draw on from the past that they can help them kind of use to overcome obstacles. So we have a lot of workouts that are either, repeat game workouts, like, the first day they kicked off with Murph. They're going to retest games workouts from 2010 onto the future, because even though it's unlikely that we see all of those, we may see a repeater, but we also know that the stimulus is going to be very similar. So if we give them something truly difficult, something will happen, physical and mental adaptation. So that's kind of where I like to start with this, is like what people would call suffering. I would call it like experiences. Kind of what kind of experiences can I make them deal with leading into being put on the stage like that. So
that's one thing I think about whenever I now see pieces that you write for the CrossFit Games athletes. It's like, there's a touch of what has happened in the past, and you mix it up with something else that's happened in the past, and you've given someone, like you said, an experience, which, is what the games is all about.
Right.
Have you gone up and down the pegboard 4 or 5 times, then tried to snatch 225 for multiple reps, or have you, rode a 5K, then took a little break, and then tried to row a 1K PR right after? It's something like that could be, show up at regional or the games very easily, and all of a sudden it's like whether or not you've done that before, you know what that's like, so you can
or something just similar.
Yeah, how to push yourself on something like that. You know what, you've done it before. It's something you can relate to. You've done a set of chest to bar that big or muscle ups that big, and it helps you.
And even though we're still looking for some physical adaptation, it's 7 weeks. It's as short as the cycle as most people that follow the blog go through, and it's not that easy to, put 50 pounds on everyone's back squat. It's not that easy to give them a 30-pound snatch PR in 7 weeks with everything else they have to worry about. It's not that easy for them to PR their mile by 40 seconds. Like, we're just trying to put them in position so that they can kind of draw from experiences to perform the best that they can under the circumstances when the competition comes around. So, yes, we want them to get physically fitter, but also we want them to have that, that past wad that they can draw from and say, okay, this is how I'm going to approach this. And this, I know myself as an athlete, I'm at this level, this is how I'm going to break this up. And you just have to be experienced in that way, because you can't plan for the games. They don't tell you the workouts. So you have to be fit and you have to be experienced.
I'm going to paint a picture for the listeners. 2013, Jordan Cook does not qualify for regionals, gets really pissed off, gets fat, gets his ass handed to him at a competition in October, decides at that point that he is going to come back and crush all of the people that hurt his feelings in the open. He did that.
He did.
He sure did.
He won regionals. That happened.
He did.
And then it was time for us to prepare him for the CrossFit Games. Now, we know that obviously for Jordan, that whatever you want to call it, box of experiences was maybe not that high compared to other athletes. So what did we do for him, and what did we learn from that in 2014?
I've admitted this like 30 times now. Basically, I beat the shit out of him in 2014, trying to give him all the experiences that he didn't have in kind of a cram session. And he learned some stuff about himself and he learned some stuff about his fitness, but he also was unable to probably train at the level that we wanted him to train at day in, day out. I probably crippled him with some of the things that I asked him to do, just saying, they could have this at the games, you better try something like this out. And then he had some issues at the games, had some events that didn't go his way. And some of that may be, his personal inexperience and his, he's still building as an athlete, and his competitive nature still hasn't developed yet. Even though he's at a certain age, he doesn't have a ton of previous sport experience to draw from, limited. So the volume was too high.
We flipped his life upside down too, though.
Yeah, we did.
It wasn't all just the physical side of things. It was like, okay, you train really hard. We know that you follow the blog. That's a pretty decent amount of volume.
Yep.
Here you go. Now this. So, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, like, let's say you have a physical gas tank, you have a mental one too.
Absolutely.
And if we burn him out mentally, it doesn't matter. He can make physical gains, and he might not be able to access any of them for months to come.
Yeah, I don't think, truthfully, I don't think he had a lot of fun doing it when we...
I remember the silly pieces that he and when Joe and Cody were still here, they would be outside carrying a log for a 10-mile run or something silly. The things they were doing.
There was no 10-mile.
It was
run.
It was like a 800 or a mile or whatever. It was.
He did run
insane.
3 back-to-back 5Ks though around the bay.
And then it was do that, and then it was drag a heavy sled. And I just remember they're like, you want to do this? I'm like, no, that looks awful. I don't want to do any of that. That looks terrible. And they kept going and going. So I can definitely see where that beating Jordan to the ground thing could come from.
And part of it was our inexperience for working with that level and trying to do too much for them too soon. But also part of it was maybe we didn't know Jordan as well as we should have leading into it. Because it's easy to blame the volume and just say, oh, you made that mistake and you won't make it again. But if you look at athletes like Jacob Heppner, who's going to the games again, he would have laughed at the stuff that we put up there. The amount of stuff, not necessarily the workouts. The workouts were damn tough, but just the amount of volume. He, in his regular training day, he does more than that. And that's one end of the spectrum. And Jordan's not on the other end by any means, but he's somewhere in the middle. And there are athletes that just need a lot less volume. We didn't maybe know him well enough to custom tailor it perfectly for him. So that's, inexperience with us, knowing him and us programming for games athletes, and just him being inexperienced in competition in general.
So 2014 to 2015. I mean, what do you see as differences? We obviously learned that in 2014. We used it in 2015.
Yep.
What was different there?
The training went a lot better, I thought. And one thing that was huge, and it's obviously a training partner.
Right.
So that was really huge for him to be able to get out of bed every day and know he wasn't suffering alone. I still think that I think the volume was better for him. I think that he was really crushing some of the pieces. But maybe if I could find an error in something I did, I maybe worried too much about his weaknesses, like way too much. And again, we have to remember it's 7 or 8 weeks to prep these guys. And yeah, you can make fixes on some movements and things like that, but to just jam weakness after weakness at somebody and then not allow them to maybe hit some of their strengths or hit their strengths regularly so that their strengths are really strong at the game so that they're taking those 80, 90, 100-point victories away. That may have been where, if I had a misstep last year, that's probably where it was. Too worried about the things he couldn't do, not focused enough on the things that he does great. And I think that could have been where I hindered him. I think we made a good adjustment with the volume because both Travis and Jordan had their own individual things they were doing, but they both had similar pieces as well, so they could train together. They both had some success in some pieces, mixed results.
Do you
overall,
think that the hitting too many weaknesses is psychological damage? Like they
Absolutely.
just like it was like, man, I suck at everything
Yes.
every single day. I just feel shitty because I can't do any of the stuff right or do it.
No
the
question
way I
about
was trying to go.
I didn't know enough about that side of the game then, and I just was like, hey, we have to work on this. What if this comes up? What if that comes up? What if that comes up? Over and over again, that was kind of what we stressed about. Yeah, and again,
That's also really tough with the scoring system because the idea behind that is creating a more well-rounded athlete,
Right.
where some of your strengths might come down and overall you might be better. But with the scoring system at the games, if you don't snag yourself a couple of top finishes, you're screwed.
Yep.
Like if you average it out, it's not necessarily where you should fall.
Right.
But with the way the scoring system is,
and they made it more drastic.
Yeah, I mean,
6 points instead of 5.
Yeah,
now.
you got to go out there and crush a couple of workouts if you want to be anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was Jeff Evans who that year with Jordan beat him in almost every single workout. But you go out there and you crush the overhead squat. You go out there and crush workouts like that.
Yep.
You finish ahead. So you kind of have to say, we really need, and this is something that I thought about this year, is we really need these guys ready to walk out there and PR their snatch, PR their clean and jerk, regardless of the conditions.
Right.
Which is not that easy.
Yeah, and with certain weaknesses, there are just things that athletes suck at. It can be because they mentally don't want to focus on them. It can be because they have physical issues, either have neglected them, or have mobility or stability issues that just don't allow them to do the movement effectively. And for us to be like, ooh, we're going to get you from shitty moving on this piece to an all-star in 7 weeks, it's not realistic with everything else they have to do. We can make slight improvements and we can make sure that they can do the best that they can do in that. But if you worry too much about particular things that could come up and they could bomb an event, then they might just bomb a bunch of events because you're not letting them train their strengths often enough so that they can push and steal those big point totals, when it counts. So I think that's a big part of it too.
One thing I think about is how has the programming changed in terms of like prepping them for, if one thing doesn't go well, that we can not, crashing down on them. Maybe talk to them at all about that? Because I think about Jordan and Travis, like they both were doing well. They had one bad event and then you could see like the air was taken out of the balloon, so to speak, and then that changed their weekend. Like Travis with the clean and jerk event, for example. Like he was having a killer weekend, and then he had one unfortunate event where he, maybe went too big or something happened. I don't really know, and it changed his weekend.
Well, I think, absolutely, and it's really important to make sure that coaches have that mental fitness as well as the physical, and that's something we've spent a ton of time this year really focusing on and thinking about and trying to apply it to athletes in different ways, because you can't just tell someone to be mentally tough. You have to, put them in situations. Yeah, you got to put them in situations so that they can develop that. It's not that easy to do on your own. So we spent a lot of time this year worrying about that. But also that's really where the undervalue of a coach comes up. So like coaches really aren't that respected yet in CrossFit. They're definitely up and coming, and there are definitely some that are, and people that value their coaches and use them do pretty well for the most part. We're definitely becoming more relevant, but so a coach that has a really good relationship with an athlete, not just working with them part-time, but like, the full-time coach, like we would basically all be with Jordan, Travis, Alexis for the past couple of years. we can actually sit down and talk to them and try to just reframe where their mind is. If something goes really bad, I mean, we spent 3 weekends in a row doing this with athletes at regionals. Like, not everything went to plan, and you still have to perform in that next piece. Every athlete, with the exception of like 2, have bad events. And they have to overcome that. And if you think about the previous event, like, oh, I'm screwed, now I have to absolutely do this. It's like you put that extra pressure on yourself, and that can be detrimental at times instead of helpful. It's just blocking it out and remembering that the past is the past and there's nothing you can do about it. And this one piece is the only thing that matters, and it's coming up and it's next. And if you can kind of give that athlete ammo, like you say, to segment these events, then they can do a lot better than if they look at the overwhelming picture of a weekend of competition that's just too much for especially a young guy or young girl to stomach. I mean, that's super overwhelming. For us to have experience coaching, it's easy for us to break things up and just kind of let them, help them focus on certain pieces at a time. I think it's important.
That's tough too. You think about how our sport is. You train all year long. The Open is 1 workout. Regionals is 7, and one of them might be skill based, one of them might be a lift, one of them might be a blink of an eye like event 7 this year. The games is like you're like, I don't know, you're like an artist, and you're like putting together this like creation over an entire weekend.
Absolutely.
And we talked about it before, the really athletic guys, the Elijah Muhammad, the Spencer Hendel, they ride that wave throughout the weekend. This is obviously an assumption, but I just assume that they know that. They know that, if I can go steal 3 second place finishes on Sunday, what's the difference?
Yep.
And you do need, those high finishes, but, you see athletes that choose just not to climb the pegboard, and
Right.
you're like, okay, well, it's not over. Like, you could still grab those points and jump 10 spots in one day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're talking about being considered one of the top 10 fittest people on earth. So if athletes can understand that you do need to ride that wave, and shit will go wrong.
Absolutely.
Shit has gone wrong to the 3 fittest men ever. We've seen one of them walk. We've seen one of them, 2 of them fail rope climbs. We've seen one of them couldn't put a sandbag. You know what I mean? Like, that shit happens, and then you wouldn't know that it happened when they're waxing the floor in the next event. So,
And wearing a gold medal.
yeah, seriously, $250,000.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, it's so individualized now that even though we write games programming, and this year we've written it as a template, and we've all talked to all the athletes we're working with, and we have a template for individuals, we have a template for teams, and we have a template for masters and teens, and we're trying to deliver this on different levels because the competition's very different. I mean, it's all the CrossFit Games, but I mean, maybe the masters and teens do similar things, but the teams and individuals couldn't be more of a different competition. I mean, it's testing fitness, but they're testing very different things. And just kind of like this year, it's really important to me to make sure that the volume is under control and that we spend a lot of time. Drew spends a ton of time figuring out what kind of lifts that can benefit them the most over 7-8 weeks. I'm really thinking about, while I still want weakness work in there for people, and I'm still trying to predict the evolution of some of the movements, I also need you to just do bitch work. I also need you to just cycle a barbell. I need you to do, sets of 30 heavy wall balls. I need you to do that stuff that it's going to be part of a workout at some point. It's really simple. It's really straightforward. And all athletes that are going to the games need things like that still. We're talking teens, masters, teams, and individuals. They all need that fitness base still, and they need to progress in that while they're kind of progressing in some of the weaknesses and making sure that, something as simple as the parallel handstand push-up last year. There's only like 10 reps of that, right? For the whole piece. There's 10 reps. That cost Sarah Sigmund's daughter the whole games, right? 10 handstand push-ups on parallettes cost her the games. So, like, they're in here. The first 3 days, they're in here. We're doing 3 on, 1 off, like old school CrossFit for the games athletes. And parallel handstand push-ups are on the second day. If you suck at them, at least you're going to know that you suck at them going in there. Maybe you can make some adjustments as you're training them. You send your coach a video, what can I do better? Maybe, next week you try them again with some new tips and you get a couple more. That's great. All right. You're not going to just be super hyper focused on parallel handstand push-ups. You still have to do all the other training because there's a chance they don't even come up.
It's a great chance they don't come
right?
up. Yeah, absolutely.
So just balancing that and making sure that you still have the goals kind of in focus is really key. I think athletes are just really focused on what they don't do well. And I think I was too, like I said before. So you want to talk about teams or what?
Hey, let's bring him up. Let's check it out.
Sure, you're like the team master now that you...
Team master, that's me.
Man, Trip's a team athlete forever.
It was pretty fun. I'll do it again for sure if the opportunity arises.
So for teams, we're doing standard like 5 days, and it's not the 3-on-1 off because we want teams to at least practice together on the weekends. What kind of differences would you from your experience watching and coaching teams, like what's the big difference at the games for teams, like comparing regionals to the games? Like what do they have to do now?
I mean, the biggest thing I thought made the difference for our team, not being necessarily the most skilled team that was on the floor this weekend, was communication and having practiced enough with enough different elements. We luckily for regionals have the test ahead of time, so we know, we're going to have to go from touch and go power snatches and toes to bar into handstand walks. We know that stuff. You don't know that stuff going for the games. So with the experiences coming back up, does your team know how to coordinate when it's, all right, we're going to do the log or worm or whatever carry. We're going to do, 100 clean jerks with the log or the worm.
Right.
Have we done that before? Does everyone know what their place is in the worm? Do they know the cues for shoulder it, over your head, all that stuff? So I think that's super important because I think that the teams that communicate the best and know each other the most and have spent enough time, and that goes for like any team in any sport ever, the more those people spend time together and work together and, better know each other and know the weaknesses and strengths, the better they're going to do when it comes time to perform. So, you look at
you guys were in 30th. You came in 12th. You basically lived together for 6 weeks. You can just tell when a team is a bunch of random people.
Yeah, a bunch of very skilled, high-level athletes
right.
that maybe haven't spent enough time together, know how to work with each other. So, I mean, more or less when I see from the blog right here, what's coming up is, the same old Misfit Athletics program we've always had, but in a way that it requires you to understand how your team needs to work together. So, if there's a swim workout and there's something after it, you have your best swimmers first or your worst swimmers first because you know that whatever's coming after is important. You have to prioritize that. So I think something like this is just it's about the experiences again, but now it's coordinating with 5 other individuals. So a lot of the same stuff from the individual side, but now put in a way that you have to communicate and coordinate with your team.
Let me ask you this. So, the team, each individual on the team needs to be fit, right? They have to be able to do their job. I was FaceTiming with the captain of one of the teams going to the games today, and we were kind of talking about, okay, what is the most important thing that can really get you over the hump as a team? Like, what can separate you by maybe 5-10 places overall without, making insane physical strides over 7 weeks, which again, we talk about how hard that is when you have to practice certain things, especially when you're a team and you really have to do a lot of skill and communication stuff. Like you said, on 2 of your 5 training days, I mean, it wasn't the greatest amount of training you did. It was more practicing workouts leading to regionals, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of similar scenarios we're going to put people in game style workouts for their training. So the fitness won't suffer, but they also don't have the greatest amount of time to really build that fitness as well. So we said, what is the biggest thing that can make a change for a team? And I said, well, just drawing from my experiences back home and watching, because I didn't do a lot of coaching for your team here. I just did a lot of observing and seeing what was going on. And what I observed was that this culture and this idea of it had nothing to do with the 6 people on the team. Nothing to do with them. It had to do with the 6 people on their team coming together as one unit and actually believing that the team that they were a part of is more important than anything that they want or desire out of this competition. Had nothing to do with their individual wants and needs. It had only to do with making sure that what they did not let down the other 5 people. And once you start kind of ingraining that in people's heads in a productive way, not beating people down and making people feel bad about not being fit at certain things, the unit as a whole begins to have an advantage over any other broken.
Definitely elevates your game for sure. I mean, that's what I thought about.
It's a chain link. It's six links on a chain together. If there's a break in that, there will be issues at the game. So if there's somebody who has an ego or somebody that has some other agenda other than serving the team as a whole, they will be a hindrance, not a help. And I think that's the easiest way, above and beyond programming, to just say, this is how we're going to elevate our team above the other 5-10 teams in front of us, because we communicate, we move together as one. It's not 6 people trying to scramble around the floor, figure out what they're doing. They're moving as one. And until you spend the time practicing that, and until you ingrain that mentality into people, you're not going to be that successful.
Yeah, I think that old adage of willing, this is going to sound silly, but willing to die for the guy next to you is going to take you a long way.
No question.
When it comes out to, the snatch event, for example, everybody on the floor that was doing their best, we had, Max almost PR'd, Caroline PR'd by 10 pounds. Nothing in her mind probably other than I just want to do this for the team. And, next thing she knows, she's a 10-pound PR on the floor in the biggest event of her life. So I think that happens all the time.
I mean,
with
Cody
that
hit
elevation.
2 at 265 within like 20 seconds because he got a no rep and just ripped the bar back over his head.
did.
I mean, that's not, he doesn't just snatch 265 all day. Like that's
he
that's a
doesn't.
heavy lift. And he was not willing to let the team suffer because his toe was on the line. Ridiculous standard. But yeah.
Hey,
You can
it happened.
see it happen, though, especially at the games sometimes we're 100, 200 feet away.
Yeah.
You see these breakdowns happen.
Yes.
You see this person yelling at their teammate and not in a way like, hey, we got to get this done. It's like, I'm fitter than you. What's your problem?
Right.
And it doesn't matter. That's not the competition. It's not if you are fitter. That's got as little to do with it as if someone else is a better teammate, if someone else, figures out how to help, figures out how to, do their part and contribute, they're a better teammate. In a sense, they're a better athlete because, in that environment.
In that
So,
role, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm sure we're preaching to the choir here, but we still see it. So it's something that's worth saying over and over.
I mean, I as much as people like to preach about it and talk about it, even within their teams, it's one thing to say it to your team before training. It's another thing to live it and see it come alive. Like, I don't think it comes alive as often as people like to talk about it. It's just, and I mean, there has been some success with super teams, but look at Froning's team in particular. 6 people live together for a full year. They train every day. That's their full-time job. 6 people living together, training together. Like, you think you can get closer together and more put together than them? Yeah, you got the fittest man on earth on your team. That's helpful. Yeah, you got a female individual games athlete on your team and a male individual.
A lot of people said Kalipa was going to be a better team athlete just based on his ridiculous
work capacity.
Be able to run out and hit 90 wall balls with a 50-pound ball, whatever. You know what I mean? So, I'm not saying that he wasn't, but that just tells you that that's not all.
Yep.
That there has to be there.
And there'll be attempts at other super teams that fail.
Oh, for sure, definitely.
I mean, I don't know when that'll be, but it'll happen. There'll be super teams that,
definitely happened at regionals. There are definitely teams that have people who are at affiliate members or affiliates only who beat out super teams just based on the fact that they spend that much time together. They weren't driving 2 days a week to go to some gym to train together so they could get on a team together.
I mean, it's trending in that direction. Like, a lot of athletes will be going team. Like, over the next year and the year after, there's going to be so many teams that are just hybrids of local affiliates or flown in regionals athletes. It's going to be out of control. But it'll come down to not who's the fittest, because at a certain point, those 6 athletes are a wash at a certain level, right? They're all a wash. They all have their gymnastic strength, their weightlifting, someone's really well balanced, whatever it is. It's that mentality, it's that belief that the team is bigger than them and that they are so in sync with each other that communication is almost just a look of the eye. It's not yelling. It's giving someone that eye contact and they understand what you want from them.
Something like that happened this weekend with a team, though. You could tell based on someone's look in their eye, like, hey, it's time to set the bar down, the deadlift hold, or it's time to move on and let someone else do more toes to bar, because you could just see that look in their eye, like, hey, it's time to move on. And that body language and stuff is something you pick up with experience.
Hackspack kind of were like, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. And they didn't necessarily have the best athletes, but they beat the teams with the better individual athletes because of just that idea.
Fort Vancouver's been doing it for years, too. I mean,
and CrossFit 808 out in Hawaii, same idea.
I mean, they live the team life, and I'm not always the biggest fan of that, and I always say, a team still needs fit individuals, so you don't need to be doing team practice every single day. But at least training with them, even if you're not doing partner WODs, you're training with them in individual pieces that you're still going to learn a lot about
the growth, the exponential growth that occurs when you're all together as a unit. I mean, along with just learning everybody's ins and outs, the amount of progress people make in that short window is impressive. So,
yes, sir.
All right, what's next?
Well,
kind of hit it all, didn't we?
Let's spend 5 minutes talking about teen and masters.
Cool.
So
all right.
It's still the CrossFit Games, but to me it feels like a hyped up version of regionals for them. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, and that's kind of not doing it justice, but
in terms of the programming, it's got nothing to do with the level.
Right. Exactly. Yes. The level is still the fittest in the world at their age group, but the programming feels like a version of regionals to me.
Oh, for sure.
When's he going to throw that curveball in, though? I mean, the games have changed.
What would it be? What would the curveball be?
It would just be
like,
hey, 16-year-olds go run 7.5K with a vet. You know what I mean? Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen eventually.
Oh,
You assume.
absolutely.
My guess is it's more of a logistics thing than
Right.
anything else. It's like we have the barbells, we have the rig, we have this, that. The other guys are going to be out swimming. Here you go. This is kind of what we got.
I mean,
So,
as long as the progression continues, there's no question it's going to be almost as much of a
I
spectacle.
mean, these teens are ridiculous.
way fitter than me. Ever.
It's
Oh, you want something
It's
crazy?
crazy.
Holly did Murph in like 50 minutes today, and then hit a 198-pound snatch right after.
and
Seven-
he's
like,
like
we're
17 years old.
Yeah, 17 years old, and that's like 5 kilos under his PR.
with a vest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something silly today. He's like, yeah, just for fun.
The
I figured I'd do this.
Masters have always been impressive. Just that like old man like strength and mentality thing is incredible. But these teens, it's just like, is that like a child games athlete? I don't even understand
Right.
what's going on right now. It's
Some of the weights they
And their
move
body's still not that developed, so
No.
they look kind of skinny. But then they snatch 225, and you're like, I quit. That's ridiculous. That's just frustrating as hell. I have
Insane.
beach muscles, and they don't do anything. This is ridiculous. So yeah. So what's the difference with the
biggest
How
thing-
would you prep? Sorry, how would you prep a teen or a master?
The biggest thing I look at is just the amount of volume. The teens can get away with a little bit more volume than the masters can. The masters got to spend a little more time recovering and, really hammering out mobility and, just general like weakness and movements, like
Yep.
not necessarily with weight, but just getting used to doing them. For Holly, he's doing a lot of the same stuff as the other games guys because I want him to be able to compare with Travis on a certain level. He's obviously doing a lot of things at a reduced maybe weight or, for example, if the first piece is 30 calories in assault, like if I have Holly do that, it's going to take him a little longer than Travis would. So we knock that down. But for the most part, he's hitting pieces that are very, very similar. Every once in a while, I'll pull a piece out that you've written for a games athlete, like teens haven't done a pegboard, for example. I might throw one of the old Masters events or one of the old teen events for him and have him do that instead, just as a way of giving him kind of more that like regional vibe to a workout. But for the most part, he's hitting something very similar, just at a a level that's more appropriate for a teen athlete. And I think that, like you said, it could be any year now that they're doing the same style of CrossFit Games that the individuals are. So he still does some of that stuff, but a lot of it's more of that regional feel like you guys just described.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head, especially with the masters, like just having those skills and the ability to do maybe high rep strict gymnastics or just gymnastics in general. And
Muscle ups over and over again,
I mean,
yeah.
not all, but almost all the masters have old man strength. Like you just
Deadlifting 600
it's
out
just
there.
crazy. It's just ridiculous. So, but using that strength, even though in the open they test the deadlift, right, raw strength. Now, when you go to the games, and they test the snatch, does that really equate when someone's shoulders are old and rusty?
You better believe you have the mobility for it or you ain't doing very well.
Exactly. So
yeah.
like that's with that separator. They take that raw strength and they test it. Okay, yeah, you're strong enough now. But are you actually, a real athlete? Like, can you go ahead and move around that bar?
Or can you walk on your hands or do something
Yeah.
just unusual that individuals used to be like, oh, an individual games athlete walked 50 feet on his hands. Now it's like all the masters, you got to do 100 feet on your hands.
Right. Unbroken.
Yeah, you better be at that level.
So yeah, those details make all the difference for them, and that's really what can separate it. Like individuals have to have that stuff. It's just it's more conditioning at that point because they all have those skills, they all have those details. Masters don't necessarily have them, and if you don't, you'll have a workout where you struggle.
In Masters, as you go up the line, it's the only place left in CrossFit where you can still Joe Carney someone. You can just, that guy over there is working his ass off, and you can just be the guy that's just moving, dropping under every power clean. We all know the Masters, their front racks up by their head. You can walk past someone. I mean, we see it when they do Amanda. We see it when they do these workouts. It's like, I want to see what's going on in round 5. That guy over in the corner that's in last, what's he going to do? Is he going to keep moving that way once these people start, once that reverse curl goes away, or once the overhead position starts to be the kind of lean back and the bent elbow?
Yep.
Is he going to pass people? So, that's still, those people are kind of disappearing a little bit in CrossFit, but that's a place where the further up the line, those skills, if they ask for them, when you can just plot back and forth, when you're pistols or you can do this or that, you're going to find yourself in a pretty sweet spot. So
Yes.
that's why we put a little bit of extra emphasis on that, because it can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. And I have nothing more to share about all this information. I'm good. I think that everyone would like to see the program. And like you said before, we will, once we get a little deeper into it, we've only written a couple weeks of it. Once we get deeper, we will put them on the site under the new tab for articles. And if you are a pro or complete member, you'll have access to see both the individual and the team games training that we wrote for our athletes for 2016. Yeah, it's just part of your membership. So you can pick it apart. You can think about it. You can comment, tell us what you think about it. You can use some of it for your own development if you want. It's all good. Open source. Learn from each other, right?
That's right.
That's what we do. And with that, I think we'll leave you now. That was episode 23.
Games edition.
Games edition. So please follow, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Be active on social media with us. We'll be active back with you if you are. And don't hesitate to ask questions. So,
Keep commenting on the blog, too.
Yes, please.
Misfitgear.com. I hear there's some new stuff coming
That's
out.
true.
Oh,
Summer line. You got to look fresh for the games. So until next time, thank you guys.